Calamari Salutations everyone, thanks for checking out the video. It's finally here, it's the week 0 of the power rankings for this season. And for this one, I'm not alone. I'm going to introduce the coach of the Nashville Needle Kings, SouthSideBraves. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, thanks for having me here, Squid.
Thanks for being here. And it was a blast already, and it will be a blast going on from here. So SouthSideBraves will be with me every week doing the power rankings, and we decided to go duo for this part of the analysis because power rankings is always fun when you have someone to debate with. And yeah, this is basically it. I hope you guys enjoy it, but first let's set some things in stone. These power rankings for this week are totally made based on the teams. So we took coach skill out of the equation and just went with what the coaches drafted, what their teams looks like, and we ranked the teams from there. And to make it a little bit more objective, we defined some criteria. I'll just call them the Arceus laws because they're totally law, they're totally legit, and whatever we say is a law, right?
Exactly.
No, just kidding. These are the criteria we came up with. You can see here that most of the common cores that people build are present. We also took into consideration the overall weaknesses of the teams. Hazard setting and control play a huge part, so we also had to take that in consideration. Speed control, speed tiers, priority, trick room or not trick room, stuff like that. And then some things that are also important but are maybe less relevant, or we felt like they would be less relevant, like momentum users, item removal, taunt users, cleric options on the team, and screens. The screens, we are a bit biased because both of us got beaten by Blattle before, and he loves running screens, so that's why it's here.
Yep, absolutely. He always seems to dominate with those screens.
Yeah, so without further ado, do you have anything to add?
Nope, I think you kind of covered it. Like you said, this is kind of our opinion, this criteria we used. And Squid wanted to make sure that people are aware that just because we think something of a Pokemon or your team doesn't mean that should stop you from using it. If you like a Pokemon, go use it, go dominate with it.
Yeah, exactly. So people can use whatever they want. But since we are analyzing this from a competitive point of view, we're gonna make you understand that picking certain mons may bring certain consequences down the line. That doesn't mean you can't use them, because Pokemon is all about fun and using the mons you want at the end of the day. So let's start the fun, shall we? And we'll start the fun with the Ender Teddiursus. They're coming up at rank 16. Don't get me wrong, no teams in this league are utter trash, okay? So this team is just a little less weak than the others. I like this team, I like some things in this team, like the fact that Umbreon and Type Null are slow momentum users that can make the Lucario and Salazzle switching safer. I like this Excelgor, that's why I highlighted it for this team, because Excelgor has a really nice speed tier and it has a really nice supportive pool that can do many things for his team. And we have to also talk about the Latios, because that huge 130 special attack will dent holes in the enemy team.
Yeah, and then some other things we talked about, I know when we were going over this team, is we talked about the cores a lot. And I know specifically for this Dragon Steel Fairy core of Latios, Lucario, and Clefairy, we talked about Lucario. It's something we kind of mentioned quite a bit, because while it is a good Steel Mon, it doesn't really give you a ton on that defensive side compared to a lot of Steel types that you would like as part of that core. So I know that's something we kind of talked about when discussing this team.
Yeah, exactly. Lucario is not really a switch-in most of the times.
Yeah, but I do love Type Null down there at that 40-point tier as well. That thing can be very bulky and a good switch into a lot of things, actually.
Yes, exactly. One thing we have to mention is that there are some key weaknesses that this team will struggle to switch in on. And one of them is Fairy, and Fairy is not exactly the type you want to lack on switch-ins. So...
No, not at all.
Yeah, exactly. So we're moving on then to the next team, and the next team is the Hustle Gods.
Yeah, so looking at this Hustle Gods roster, some really strong offensive threats, specifically that Urshifu single strike at the Rabombi's a good supportive mon, Vikavolt can set up webs for you, and those type of things. But when you go from top to bottom of this roster, something they're kind of missing is some bulk here. Have it across that roster. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the main thing I look at. They have a ton of momentum, though. A ton of U-turn type users and just being able to control momentum of the match. But like I said, just the lacking of bulk, I think, is you see them as low as you do.
By the way, I'd like to mention something. This team doesn't like forests at all. They have +6 in grass switch-ins, so that's something. I bet that Swampert won't get hit by a grass move.
Yeah, they definitely covered for the Swampert.
There's also some really nice things for this team. Multiple stealth rockers, 2 sticky web options, and Ribombi can also function as a pretty good defogger if you want her to, but doesn't take it very well. Overall, the Steel Dragon Fairy could be better, but they do have the Ribombi, so they get bonus points for that. The Steel type being Mawile did drag this team down a little bit on the power rankings, and the Water, Fire, Grass core. I mean, Fire and Grass types are Maractus and Torracat, and they aren't exactly the best Fire and Grass types around. So yeah, that ultimately ended up penalizing this team a little bit, but it doesn't mean they don't get their time in the sun, and they will get their time to shine for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I think you kind of mentioned that. I think the 2 lowest points we gave for this team when going over it was that Firegrass Water core, and then also the amount of weaknesses this team kind of has that they don't cover all that well. But like you said, they do cover the grass one especially well.
All right, so moving on, we have 14 the immunity idols, and that's why this is the main reason we made that disclaimer down the line. We only took team building into consideration, and that is why Monte sits at rank 14, because on a skill-based power rankings, he wouldn't sit at this place.
Yeah, exactly. And I can say this is my week 1 opponent, who I actually believe I'm playing in about an hour and a half, so pretty much right after we record this video. Okay. And while looking at his team, if I just saw like 14th place team, I'd feel pretty good about the match. But I know it's Mounte, and I don't feel good about it whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided to highlight the Conkeldurr, because Conkeldurr is feeling a really cool role on this team. So Spectrier is the main threat of this team, and Spectrier has 2 resistance, which are Dark type and Normal type. Yeah, and both of those have a shared weakness in fighting. So Mounte, by picking the Conkeldurr round 2, is basically making sure he can threaten or deal with the resist from Spectrier, and that's something smart he did while team building. Who would have thought Mounte would do smart things, right?
Yeah,
of course he will. There's a mon I'd like to mention also. It's a favorite of mine. It's Quillfish. I love me so Quillfish.
Yeah, I knew we couldn't get through this team without you mentioning some Quillfish.
Of course we couldn't. And he also has some bulky mons, and the main consequence of this team not building the normal cores that people build, they are left with some pretty big holes on their resistance side, and their These teams' walls all share a weakness, and it can be exploited. So this Malte does really have to watch out for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, kind of looking at his team when I was even team prepping for them, I really like that his top 2 picks, or his 2 most expensive picks, I don't know if he got them in the first 2 rounds, but Spectre and Conqueror, okay, gives him a super strong special attacker, a super strong physical attacker, and then he immediately went and got 2 walls to cover them. Like you said, the only downside of those 2 walls he has is, yeah, like you said, that shared weakness between them.
By the way, Malte being at rank 14, don't count him out. He will surprise you, and he will out-battle you, because he's a terrific battler.
Absolutely. The first time I actually ever made power rankings, I didn't even know who Malte was yet. I hadn't met him, and I think I put him dead last. And I think he ended up winning that league.
Yeah, he did. So we'll move on then to the next team, and at rank 13 we have the Montello Crowbats.
Yep, here we got the Crowbats, and this team actually, if you look compared to the other ones, kind of went a little more average with their point distribution, with Hydreigon being their most expensive one at 120, who is a fantastic mon, can do a lot for you. And then after ton in that 80 or really 60 point range. Yeah, and looking at his cores, the Dragon Fairy Steel isn't really all that there. And then the Fire, Water, Grass, he has Decidueye, Omastar, and Turtonator, who, again, how powerful that core is in question a little bit. But he does some of the other things pretty well. Like, he has some pretty good knockoff users, has some decent priority, and some taunt users if he needs them. Decent speed, I think, not terrible there. But yeah.
I'd just like to say something. If the other coaches are watching this, this coach right here, this team right here, is probably the reason you don't have a dark type or a ghost type, because he decided to take them all. And that does come with its weaknesses. So there's some key types that he lacks resistance on. Steel resist is not existent. Ice resist is Omastar. Dragon resist is Carbink. Yeah, so that's why we insist on the course so much. They give you a wide variety of resistances that you can use to prep against most of these teams. Like you said, this team does things very well, like having priority, like setting up screens, not that much, but and setting up taunt. So if people manage to toxic stall this team, I don't know what he's doing, because he has so many taunt users. He can stop that on its tracks by far before it even happens.
Has some decent hazard fetters as well.
By the way, you want to talk a little bit about the Hydreigon?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at this team and what they bring, I think the Hydreigon's kind of going to need to carry a lot of weeks, especially on the offensive side for this team, obviously, is what Hydreigon does. But I think the coverage Hydreigon gets, and that can be very useful to this team. And like I said, just with looking at the firepower, but I just think Hydreigon's going to need to put in work on a fairly consistent basis for this team to pick up some wins.
All right, so we're moving on to rank 12, and at 12 we have the 3 Electrons. And this is basically that team that everyone looked at when the draft ended, because this madman Sven Thun decided to pick 2 S-tier picks and then just spent the rest of the draft making up for the lack of points.
Yep.
But this team is quite interesting in the fact that it has Landorus Incarnate, which is a mon that is usually banned, and it has Cinderace with the Libero ability. And that means that because he has these 2 mons, he will win matches just because he has the 2 of them. They're that good. But if you look away from those 2, there's a Komo, and Komo is a mon I like very much because it can do many different things. And there's a Seismito that will basically function as the main wall this team has. Some hazard control in the Delmise, But unfortunately, the cores on this team aren't that great. The Firegrass Water is, but the Dragon Fairy Steel one, which is the most important of the two, isn't that great. And I think is he lacking? Oh yeah, his Steel type is Poniard, and I personally don't consider Poniard as a Steel type because
No, I think we kind of figured that out when looking over. To be honest,
exactly. I'm interested in seeing the Vespiquen in action. I've never seen that mon being utilized, so I'm looking forward to it. And the Pikachu with a light ball hits hard, but it's basically the definition of a glass cannon. So
I'm actually curious. I know he played Bishmi week 1, and Bishmi's video of it went up today. Did you happen to see his match for week 1?
I haven't finished yet, but I do know there's a certain Pikachu there.
Yeah. So I don't know how much of it I should spoil or just leave that to the imagination.
We'll just leave it at that and make the audience go check out that video.
Yeah, go do that.
Okay. Anything you want to add for this team?
I mean, you pretty much covered it all. Like I said, he spent 280 of his points on Cinderace and Landorus, two fantastic mons. But spending that much points on the top of your team means they're going to have to put in work on a weekly basis for your team to pick up wins. I am with you. I love Como. Like I said, so much flexibility that Pokemon gives you. But, I mean, that's the main point of this team. He spent 280 points on 2 mons. They need to get kills every week for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I expect nothing short of Landorus Incarnate being the kill leader at the end of the season.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Moving on, we go into the 11th place, and it's the 6th Street Survivor. And go ahead and talk a little bit about this team.
Yeah, so this team, some very good in some aspects. Speed control is very fantastic for them. Very good knockoff users. But I think the one thing we actually said this team might be the best in the league at, or at least up there, was their Fire, Grass, Water core. The Barraskewda, Politoed, even Talonflame, Ludicolo. Like having those 4 mons, like I said, you've even got multiple waters. And that really gave this core a very high ranking.
The thing for me is that rain teams don't necessarily have to have a fire type. Since they have one, they get bonus points for that. That's basically it. With
the team, he'll probably bring most of the time, like you said, with the rain. Probably don't see Talonflame all that much. But if he ever does choose to go without the rain, Talonflame's a fantastic fun.
Exactly.
I know.
Not as a defogger, though.
Yes, correct. And I think the rain also covers for Excavalier very well, covering up that fire weakness a little bit.
Yeah, you actually you done me a favor by highlighting this Cavalier. I love Cavalier on this team so much. It's probably my favorite pick of this team.
Yep, go ahead and talk a little bit about it.
Oh, Cavalier is a beast. That's what it is. So, Cavalier will do many things for this team. It will dent holes on the enemy's side because it's a terrific wall breaker. It can run. It has really nice coverage. Ground moves in Drill Run, Mega Horn, Steel attacks, and some dark type moves like Knockoff. It also has Swords Dance for more power, and because it's slow as hell, running Trick Room against this team isn't really an option because the Cavalier will be there to put an end to those plans. Some interesting thing is that this team didn't pick an S tier. Did you notice that?
Yeah, they went more well-rounded at the top of their team.
But the top of their team, Barraskewda and Zapdos, in the rain will function really well. They don't really need to be S tiers. The only thing there's something I don't like about this team, and it's the Meowstic and the Morgrem both being here. They basically fill the same role. They're kind of redundant. It could be one of those could be dropped and picked, and they could pick something else. And being a rain team means they will have priority attacking most of the times due to the immense amounts of speed control that Rain brings. And the reason I mentioned back there that Talonflame wasn't really a defogger is that besides the Talonflame, the only removal on this team is the Zapdos. And he might not want to bring Zapdos as a defogger every week, and that will leave him with limited options in terms of removal. So that's a weakness that the enemies will look to explore while prepping.
Yep, exactly. Like you said, that Zapdos can function very powerfully in the rain, especially. So having to waste a slot on defog is a little annoying for this team.
And not just that, waste battle momentum to defog instead of attacking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on, we go to the 10th place. By the way, something we forgot to mention. At the beginning of the 6th Streets Viper, teams up to the 6th spot are basically all clumped up very close in the point system that we attributed. So these are basically the middle of the pack teams we're in. And continuing the trend of the middle pack teams, we go to the Trash Town Thieves at rank number 10. This team is Bishmi's team, and he drafted some interesting picks that I also like. I've used the Crustle before, mainly as an answer to a certain G-Max Charizard. I've used the Lantern, and the Lantern and the Mantine here are both water absorbers, so going against the Dracovish, they would be good to go against the Dracovish, but the thing is, Dracovish is in the other division. I feel like they're kinda redundant here. I can see the Lantern still being here because it would function as an electric immunity to pair really nicely with the Corviknight. And speaking of Corviknight, Corviknight is an amazing pick, and it was sitting at the A tier only, and Bishmi did good picking that on the round 1 because it gave him a terrific defogger, and paired up with the Mantine, both of these mons are really good at defogging, and that is a valuable lesson because sometimes you only need 2 defoggers, but they sure as hell might be great defoggers.
Exactly. You talked about the last team we looked at having some defoggers that you might not want to run as defoggers.
Exactly.
This team will have no problem running Corviknight or Mantine, or even both if need be for some reason. But really, whichever one they want as a defogger every single week they need it. No issues there from them doing that.
One thing I'd like to mention also about this team is the Darmanitan. Darmanitan, I feel like, is a double-edged sword. You know what it's gonna do, but it's very good at doing it, and it will give this team an advantage over other teams. If I recall correctly, between the S plus S and A tiers, this was oh no, there's another ice type on the A tier, but in the S tier this was the only ice type Pokemon drafted, and having a really high ice threat on your team will make the enemies prep differently in the case that they can't bring their dragons as safely as they wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know one other thing we mentioned about this team as well, not as important as some of the other categories in that, but if you look at the priority moves available to this roster, there's basically none. Rapidash down there gets Quick Attack, and Persian gets Fake Out, and I believe that's all this team has access to. So again, not that big a deal, but if it ever comes up, this team just doesn't have access to that many options.
So moving on to the next team, at 9th place we have the Calexico Blazicans, the team of the commissioner himself, Sen.
Yeah, so like you said, this is the commissioner's team. Sen usually does very well in draft leagues and that. And with his team here, something we liked about it was the Dragon Fairy Steel Core, while a little unconventional because Klefki's filling 2 roles as both the Steel and the Fairy type. Latios and Klefki are 2 very good mons that can pair well together. Klefki gives you a bunch of that support role, screens, taunt, whatever else you want to do with it.
Spikes also?
Spikes. I have a terrible, terrible memory of being paralyzed 6 straight turns after a Thunder Wave from a Klefki.
Oh god.
So I'm not even going to talk about that one. But then he has other powerful moms as well, with like Zeraora and Zapdos up there, that 120 and 100 point range. But like a lot of other teams getting 3 Mons at A or S like he has, he does have 3 Mons down there at the bottom with Electabuzz, Fungus, and Artillery that he probably is not going to get a ton of value out throughout the season. So I do know that. But I know he does like Palpitoad as his water ground type there at the 40 point range. So, and I also love Serena in the 60 point tier. I think you can get a lot of work out of Serena. So I think his team has the pieces to be very successful this season.
Yeah, something I'd like to talk about is momentum, and Sen loves his momentum, and this team is no exception. He's got 3 U-turners, 1 teleporter, 2 volt switchers, and baton pass on Latias if he needs to. So Sen won't like momentum, and I know he likes it very much. Also, a really good screen setter in Klefki if you want to run that. And Zapdos here is really cool because with the Defiance ability, he basically is stopping the enemy from defogging hazards away and screens away. So it will function, it will pair very well with the Klefki. Like you said, Klefki, I think, is basically the glue that is holding this team together, providing key resistances, filling in a supportive role to enable Sen's biggest threats, and I think the Klefki will do really nice this season, and that's what I told Sen, and I really hope it comes to fruition.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think that Klefki is definitely the most important mon on this roster.
So we're moving on into the number 8, and it's the Miami Heatmor. And Miami Heatmor has a Garchomp, and Garchomp is amazing. This thing does check out the cores really nicely, but there's one thing that is holding this team back, and it's hazard control. The hazard control on this team is Surfetched and Unpheasant. Unpheasant is not one of those mons you want to bring every week, and Surfetched, do you really want to run defog on Surfetched?
Yeah, never. I've never wanted to put defog on Surfetched.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the struggling part for this team. But for some positives, like I said, cores for this team are really good. I especially like the Serena because I've never seen it in action for a full season, and I'm looking forward to see how that checks out. But the mon I decided to highlight for this one was the Zarude. The reason I highlighted Zarude is because I don't like it. And since I don't like it, I would like to see Aldra prove me wrong and just make me believe that Zarude is a great pick. Because the thing that makes me not like Zarude very much is that double weakness to bug type, and with U-turns so important while battling, it basically gets demolished by it. It's kind of like Celebi syndrome.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad you highlighted it because I wanted to mention too. I think it's my first time seeing Zarude drafted in a draft league, so I'm kind of excited to see how he uses it as well. I get what you're saying with the 4 times weakness to the U-turns and that. So I have no idea if he can make it work or not, but it's kind of one of the mons, if not the number 1 mon, that I want to see how well he uses it.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be checking out the Zarude also during this season.
Because yeah, if he can use it well, I think that makes that core of Primarina, Zarude, and Chandelure really powerful if he can get the Zarude to work.
One thing I don't like is the Doublate. The main reason you want to Steel type most of the times is for it to switch in on special attacks. And if there's one weakness in Doublade, it's its special side. Let's say the enemy runs a flamethrower. Doublade is not gonna like that. It's taking 2 of those tops. But you do have the Chandelure for that, so I don't know. I just feel like Steel type being so frail on the special side is not something I'd like for my team.
Yeah, and I can see that argument. Like I said, this is the team I'm most intrigued by. I'm curious to see how they do.
Alright, we'll be checking out Aldra during the season. But next we're going to the Brisbane Real Boomers at 7th place. And how do you feel about this team?
In the Real Boomers have a pretty decent Dragon Fairy Steel core with the Zygarde, Aromatisse, and Steelix. While that Steelix is a lower point Steel Pokemon, we've talked about it with some other teams. that Steel, you kind of want a switch in and a defensive mon, and Steelix is definitely that. Might not always help on the offensive side, but definitely can become a switch in. Obviously a good hazard setter for you. Fantastic hazard removal from this team, along with great cleric priority and screen options. But yeah, like we mentioned before, Rotom Heat, great defogger. Hitmontop, great rapid spinner. Those are some of the highlights. And then also you got a pretty decent water, fire, grass core as well with the Rotom Heat, Araquanid, and Trevenant. Trevenant being down there. I don't know how much you believe in Trevenant or not.
But I do like Trevenant doing certain specific things. Yeah. There's some niche roles it can fill.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's Topmon, obviously. We went ahead and highlighted that Zygarde and went up to the S+ tier to grab a Pokemon, and Zygarde can always be a problem for teams. Just a great powerhouse of a Mon. And again, going up to that S+ tier, you're investing a lot of points in a Mon, so you better know how to use it and get success out of it. And Zygarde is a Pokemon that you can definitely do that with.
There's also one thing we talked about this team, and that it's really slow, but we decided not to penalize it that much on the slow side, because this team has a lot of momentum of priority users, and good ones at that. Extreme speed on Zygarde, bullet punch on Hitmontop, Mach punch on Hitmontop, sucker punch on Datmon and Skuntank, and also Trevenant. Yeah, lots of priority, and also 2 Trick Room setters. Yeah, exactly. So both Trevenant and Aromatisse, and it has some good mons that can abuse it. For instance, Araquanid is a really good Trick Room mon, Steelix also. And I just wanted to mention one thing more in the hazard setting chapter. His 2 rockers are Armaldo and Steelix. Steelix is a pretty good stealth rocker, not gonna lie. Armaldo you're not gonna want to bring every week. That leaves this team with basically 1 stealth rocker. That's not ideal because it can be exploited. And another thing that made us not penalize this team much on the speed department is the sticky web from the Araquanid, being one of the best sticky web users in the game. Moving on to the Nashville Nidokings. I don't know if you ever heard about this team before.
No, I haven't. Brand new to me.
Alright, so let me talk about this team. It has the Landorus T, which everyone loves to talk and rage about, and everyone knows what it does. It's a very versatile mon. It will do many things for you. The Azumarill is also a terrific pick in my opinion. Groudon, I don't see it belonging on this team, but we have already discussed that a little bit. It's kind of redundant with the Azumarill there, and you've also mentioned it on your analysis video. I decided to highlight the Amoonguss for you, and the reason why is that although I have seen you pick it, I haven't seen you use it that much. And I feel like Amoonguss is a really good pick and you're undervaluing it, and you should use it more in many different ways, because it's not that one-dimensional. I also like the Electivire. I mentioned it in my pre-draft analysis, and out of the D tier, I think it's definitely a value pick, and one mon that has a really good physical pool that it can take advantage of. And the Xatu for hazard control, not many mons get magic bounce, and Xatu fills a really niche role because of that reason. One thing I don't like about your team is your Fairy, Steel, Dragon core. I like the Steel and the Fairy, don't get me wrong, but the Dragon, Shelgon, I think you could have gotten something better out of that. But your Water, Grass, Fire is solid. I like it very much. Yeah, your team is also really well suited for some things. Priority, for instance. We all know that Azumarill, Bellydrum, Aquajet set. Lots of momentum users also. Lots of Stealth Rock users. Defogging options in Xatu and the magic bounce it brings. Defog on Landorus, but you don't always want to run Defog on Landorus. So I think you could do a little bit more with some more hazard removal, and yeah, you basically check out all of the boxes, and that's why you sit so high on the standings at 6th place. Anything you want to add about your team?
I appreciate the kind words about the team, and like I said, I don't really like talking about my own team or ranking my own team, so I have very little to do with going over my own roster. But you did cover some things that I've kind of talked about in my own video. The Crawdunt kind of does the exact same things as a Zoomerel. So at some point in the season, pretty early on, I'm probably going to be looking to trade Crawdunt or do some other things with it. Yeah, and the Shelgon down there at 20, I didn't have many points left. I wanted to get a better dragon, but I kind of ran out of points, and so I got stuck with the Shelgon.
Yeah, one more thing I forgot to mention. Your team is slow as heck. Good luck on that department. So this concludes the middle of the pack teams. From now on, we're going to start seeing teams that are really well built and are just a cut above from the rest of the league. And they basically check all the boxes that we made the criteria to. And we'll start with the number 5 team, and it's the Hellblaze Volcaronas. So go ahead and talk about this team.
Yeah, so like you said, these top 5 kind of the ones we placed a tier above everyone else. First of them being Lucas's team and the Volcaronas. Very strong aspects of this team. One of the strongest I think you'll see consistently from these top 5 is the Dragon Fairy Steel Cores. For this one, Dragapult and Skarmory, about as good as you can get from your Dragon Steel part of the core. Alcremie may be a little lacking down there, but like I said, Dragapult and Skarmory really carry that. And then also in the Fire, Water, Grass core, you have Entei, Quagsire, and you kind of try to convince me of the power of Tangela to finish off that core.
Yeah, Tangela is really bulky on the defensive side, and it has regenerated as Tangrowth does. And it's sitting on the D tier, and it's honestly a steal from the D tier. I've drafted Tangela from the C tier in previous iterations of other leagues, and I didn't feel like it was a waste of a pick.
All right. And then also, I know he knows how to use double to a great extent, so that's another good mon for him. Yeah, he has pretty good speed on this team as well. Pretty fast team. And then also with Dragapult and that being at the top there, I love me some Dragapult.
I know you do. You basically draft it every time.
Yep, this is one of the few times I don't have it.
Okay, one thing this team could have in better conditions is the hazard removal option. Skarmory is one of those mons that does fill the defogging role really nicely, but because it's capable of doing so many things, you don't really want to run defog every week. So having another really good defogger could have bumped this team a little bit higher. It also has a really nice screen setting with the Mr. Rhyme and screen control, if you can say that. And the other screen setter for both screens is Dragapult. There's some instances where you can run screens Dragapult, but I wouldn't advise it every week. And on the priority department, this team also does extremely well with the extreme speed from Entei, the sucker from Dragapult, and the bullet punch from the Machoke. One thing you'll start seeing with these teams is that they cover their weaknesses really well, and Lucas' team is no exception, but he could do well on the flying type resistance department. He basically has no flying type switching but the Skarmory, but at the same time Skarmory is a pretty good flying type switching, so there's that. And physical dark types can also maybe exploit the Alcremie somewhat because of its lower defense stat, but other than that, defenses are pretty well covered, I'd say.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Moving on to the number 4, and at number 4 we have the Sydney 6. One thing about this team is Tapu Lele. Another thing about this team is Tapu Lele. No, just kidding. This team really has... I think we decided that this was the best Fairy Steel Dragon core of the league, right?
I believe so. I believe we gave 2 perfect scores, and I believe this was one of them.
Yes, exactly. I'm so in love with this Dragon Steel Fairy car. Oh my god. They cover each other's weaknesses perfectly, so nicely. It's insane. It's really insane. If you think about it, Hit Run is basically a 4 times resist to both the 4 times resist from Noivern and the Steel type attacks that will want to hit Tapu Lele. That's bonkers. That's bonkers. Oh my god. Cover those weaknesses so nicely, and the result is he will basically be able to bring these mons every week, and they are very big threats against the opponents and will make preparation really difficult for their opponents. I highlighted the Scrafty though, and the reason I highlighted Scrafty is because this team is a little bit exposed on some types, like Dark and Rock specifically, and also Ghost. And Scrafty is basically the best resistance this team has for these 3 types, and that will put the Scrafty in quite a position, because there will be a week where the Scrafty has too many holes to fill for the team, and that may not bring good fortune for the outcome of that battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of along those same lines, I actually think this Vaporeon at the 80-point range, I think fits in very well for a lot of those same reasons. And not to mention giving it another core of Heatran, Celebi, and Vaporeon is very nice as well. Like I said, I think that might have been my favorite pick of the team, even though they have the fantastic core. Like, that's awesome. I think Vaporeon was a very good pick after they got that core to kind of round it out pretty well.
Basically, this team checks all of the boxes, and the reason it isn't higher on our power rankings is because its defoggers, or its removal, is basically Noivern. It has defog on Noivern, and Noivern, I'm gonna repeat myself, but you don't want to run defog on Noivern every week, and I tell that from my own experience, where I drafted Noivern once, and it was one of my 2 defoggers, and the result is I had to basically run defog on it every week, and the result is I couldn't run coverage that it desperately needed. And the other removal on the team is Wartortle, and he isn't going to bring Wartortle every week. That means that effectively most of the weeks he will have 1 removal.
Yeah, like you said, you covered that well, because I don't foresee Wartortle even coming half the weeks. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he loves Rapid Spin Wartortle, but I think you can kind of plan for his Noivern to have defog most of the time with his current roster.
We're entering now the top 3, and we'll enter the top 3 with the Cerulean City Mewtwo Sands team. Oh no, never mind. Lucario's team, and it's the Sand team. It's the Dracovish team. You all know what that does, right?
Yeah, everyone should know what that does by this point. So yeah, looking at it, like you said, got the Hippowdon with the Dracovish, which if you don't deal with, is just going to sweep through your team. So make sure you have answers to that, and a lot of teams just won't, because that Dracovish is that powerful. And then also backs it up with Mew. The different movesets you can run on Mew is ridiculous. You can bring it as a Stealth Rocker, you can bring it as an attacker, special attacker, whatever you want to do with Mew, you can find a way. That's great. I think the Arcanine and Whimsicott kind of round out that Water, Fire, Grass core if he wants to use that. Miltank being a tank for him. Sableye being able to do Sableye things. I hate Sableye. So annoying to go up against.
Annoying. Really.
Yeah. Actually fits in with his team pretty well, but I mean the highlight of the team, you can see right there in the middle screen, is the Hippowdon with the Dracovish.
Yeah, and that combo will force heavy preparation from the opponents, and Dracovish on its own right forces drafting preparation from the opponents, which is insane to think about. Yeah, there's not much else to say about this team. It's really good, it's really well thought out, it's really well rounded. Maybe a little bit of a flying weakness, maybe a ghost weakness even, if you can say that. But other than that, terrific team. I'm looking forward to see how you use that Mew. And yeah.
The only other thing I would throw in is great hazard setters. I kind of mentioned Mewcan, but obviously Hippowdon. and that Miltank can. So I mean, ton of hazard options if this team wants to go that route.
Yeah, if you want to know how to draft the team to hazard stack the opponent, just take a lesson from Mr. Lucario here, because he can do it basically everything. So moving on to the top 2 of the league, and to the surprise of many, the current champion is at first place. So I know I talked about the champions picks on the pre-draft, on the draft analysis, but it's really not the best team we think there's on the league right now. That said, this team is still amazing, and to me, in the way that they drafted, Sally Mumble already proved to me why he was the champion, because his team is phenomenal. It's synergistic, it's full of amazing picks that I love. I mean, I love the Tapu Koko, and he drafted it on round 2. On round 2, that should be illegal. He has the Dragonite, he has the Mamoswine, he has the Bronzong, he has the Sceptile, he has the Tentacruel, he has the Poliwrath, he has the Pinsir. I think the only 2 mons that I don't... There's only one mon on his team that I really don't like, which is the Kadabra. And Rotom, I've used it, it's good, but it doesn't strike me as hitting gold. Other than that, weaknesses on the weaknesses department, the champion decided that he didn't need ghost resistance. If it's to be expected the same way as last season, he will probably meet Mountay on the final. That may happen or may not. And if he does meet Mountay in the finals, he will have to face Spectrier without the Spectrier answer. That's a concern you could have, or you might not want to have that concern and just decide to go with your season regularly. But like I said, I think the only thing I'd change from this team was taking out the Kadabra for something else that I felt more comfortable with.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of just pile on to what you said. You kind of went down the roster and looked at all the powerhouse mons they have. I think this is one of, if not the only roster, I think, in the league, where I think all 11 mons they have are viable. I think the points were a little scarce in the draft, so a lot of people, if you just, I mean, even look at my own team, down there at the bottom, I got stuck with Shelgon and Shelmid and Dedenne, who, those 3 probably, I personally like Dedenne a little bit, but the other 2 probably aren't going to show up very much, if at all. Whereas this roster, I think all 11 mons are viable, and you kind of got to prep for all 11 on any given week.
Exactly. It's so terrifying to prep against this team. The only clear weakness being ghosts, and the only really exploitable way of breaking through this team is that single type, and not many teams have ghost coverage to exploit that. By the way, did we mention the speed tiers on this team? They're just amazing. 130, 120 with Unburden, 100s on a wall, 105. Oh my god. Prepping against a team like this would give me nightmares during that week.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can make a case for this team being number 1, but we do have them slotted at number 2 here with a great roster.
Yes, exactly. And the reason why this team isn't number 1 is because the Philadelphia Melmetals really just went through the roof with their 4 first picks.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about the last team being deep and being able to go all 11. This one, I think, has the best top 4 mons as far as like covering each other's weaknesses, along with having power, walls, offense. Like their top 4, I think, accomplishes everything they could need, and then everything else they could throw on is just bonus at that point.
Exactly. So with 4 months, they basically checked all the boxes, and that freed up all their draft to basically just pile on those things he already has, just to have multiple options of who's running what on every week. Only thing I really don't like is the Jigglypuff, but it's definitely better than the Dunsparce, in my opinion.
I don't know how much I believe in Charge Bug either, to be honest, but
I think there's some cool things you can do.
I'll have to be proven wrong with that one. I'll wait to see the Charger bug.
What can we say about this team other than it is basically amazing and basically perfect? Ground weakness isn't exactly the best one, and because it has the Claydol, okay, Claydol is quite a good ground resistance and ground switching, but Claydol doesn't have that good of a regeneration pool, meaning damage it takes will most definitely stick throughout the match. And the other ground resistance is the Archeops, and if there's a wrong prediction there, the Archeops is basically below half health, and it's basically useless at that point.
Yeah, that's why I think that Claydol was an important fifth pick. We talked about the top four, but I think Claydol fits in pretty well if the team could use as well.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think Claydol is still a very good pick, but since we're talking about the best team in the league, we're just nitpicking at this point because I think the best compliment I can give to the coach and this team is basically just give me this team on a league and I'll use it, no problem. Just like that. No changes needed.
Yeah, and I know we talked a couple teams back about some of the best Dragon Fairy Steel cores. I believe this was I think we had two perfect scores maybe for Fire Grass.
The other
Water
one was the Tauruses.
Yeah.
This one is a perfect Fire Grass Water core.
And I think it was the only one, or was there two we gave a perfect score for that?
The 6th Street's Viper.
Okay, so yeah, we agreed though that this Fire Water Grass score, this team is about as good as you can get. We gave it a perfect score for a reason because those top three are incredible.
I don't think there's much else to see about this team. You'll basically get to see all of it when you prep against it. It's amazing. You're gonna have headaches. It will be terrible. And I will love to see this team being well utilized. You want to talk about the Dragalge? Because I know you don't like that pick that much, as I do.
Yeah, that's kind of why I highlighted it. I want to hear you talk about it a little bit. I don't love Dragalge, but go ahead.
So Dragalge, grounded toxic spikes user. It's a poison type, so it can absorb those toxic spikes and set up the spikes himself. The reason it's most known for is adaptability, and Dracos with adaptability from Dragalge will hurt all days of the week, especially if he has specs there. But you still have to consider that it can function as a special wall, because it's 123 special defense is nothing to laugh about. And it also gives something really important to the team. Along with Ferrothorn, it's basically stopping enemies from using Trick Room against this team. And this team has really good speed tiers. That Blaziken is 80, but it basically counts it as 80 plus 1. 85 at Tapu Fini on that, and Tapu Fini is basically a defensive mon, so having 85 speed is not that too shabby. 110 for the Frostlass, 130 for the Jolteon, 110 for the Archeops. Most of the times you will have to respond to what this team does, and it will leave the opponents thinking hard. So
yeah, absolutely.
So this is basically it for our week 0 power rankings. Again, we're gonna say it. These were analyses from a competitive point of view. It doesn't stop you from using the mons you want. It doesn't stop you from using the mons as you want them. It's just things we felt like people did well from a competitive point of view, or could improve upon on their drafted teams. We'd like to mention that there will be a shared document at the description of the video where we basically have all the scores visible to everyone, so everyone knows how much we gave in each category and how much we weighted each category. And there's also a description, a brief description made for every team on the rankings, and also a relative strength power rankings with some tier lists where we fit the teams into each tier. So it will be down in the description. Be sure to check it out. So anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just real quickly kind of wanted to say that I think the preseason power rankings are so much different than the in-season ones. These are all hypothetical off what we think the coaches can do with their mons and such, what we know of the Pokemon themselves. Whereas I think throughout the season, actually getting to see what the coaches do with the specific teams, I think is personally where I think I can judge a little bit better. So I'm excited to see how the coaches perform with these rosters. And one last thing I wanted to say was, I hope you guys enjoy that doc that Squid just mentioned down in the description. Squid put a ton of work into this. Like, it's incredible how much he's worked on this. So please show him some love. Like, I'm here to help, but he's put in a massive amount of work to do this. So I hope you guys enjoyed this.
I mean, it is my job as an analyst, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Adam did mention that power rankings starting from next week will look a lot different from this. And especially on the first weeks, jumps will be high and wide throughout the rankings. So thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe not just to this channel but to everyone's channel on the league, especially my good buddy SouthSideBraves, who's joining me for the power rankings. And any last words?
Nope, just thanks for watching, guys. I hope you all have a good night.
Squid and SouthSideBraves jetting out.